It's time for Lefties Losing It. And what is it with the left and violence? They cannot help themselves. Time and time again, they resort to violence, whether it's mass violence, like we saw with the BLM and Antifa riots, or one-on-one violence, like this next clip. Watch here as this lefty loses it during a discussion about abortion, attacking a pro-life activist, Savannah Craven-Antano.
I think that you just don't understand the magnitude of having a child.
Yeah, well, I'm not the one who admitted they would be okay with killing babies in foster care and killing children that have been abused.
That's not the point. What I'm saying.
That's really.
What's wrong with you?
Charming. That punch left Savannah bruised and bleeding, but it's okay because the charming abortion enthusiast who threw that punch has since apologised. Well, sort of. Brianna Rivers of the Bronx said this of her victim. She said, "Savannah is a professional antagonist, not a reporter, and the truth will be told. I will not allow my image to be defamed by this woman's actions. Anyone who knows me knows how respectful I am. I don't even litter. There's no way you believe I'm punching people for disagreeing with my point of view." Lady, I do believe you would punch people because of their point of view, because I've just been watching it. That's precisely what you did. Dear me. I think what these lefties need is a therapy. This next woman agrees with me, but she wants taxpayers or Trump supporters to pay for her therapy because she can't cope in the age of Trump.
All right, so here's what I want to know as an American for this repeated trauma that I'm going through, and the rest of the world, to be quite honest. Asking for the world. Who do we send our therapy bill to? Because now that you've dismantled the entire healthcare system, RFK Jr., you f***ing moron, what are we supposed to do? Oh, actually, are there any therapists left? They're probably not allowed to therapize us, right? Right?
I really do think it's high time that we made asylums great again. Forget about building the wall, build asylums. Talking about asylums, time to check in with MSNBC. Let's hear from Democrat operative Symone Sanders. Here she's crying for gangbangers being sent to El Salvador. Remember, the American taxpayer saves a fortune by housing these criminals in El Salvador instead of US prisons.
I would like to know who's the camera crew that was hired to film this propaganda, and what company is literally exploiting the men in these videos for what? The men that you see in these videos that are dressed in white that the United States sent to El Salvador, your tax dollars are paying for them to be housed there. They didn't just pay for the flight. The tax dollars are paying for every single one of these men. Many of them, now innocent people who are not gang members.
Innocent people, she says. Yes, the sort of innocent people covered in gang tattoos, cavorting with criminals and in the country illegally. Time for a Scott Jennings special on CNN. This time he schools a Karen. No, really, that's her name.
So if we want to just keep
question, who's more popular right now, Donald Trump or congressional Democrats?
Doesn't matter. Donald Trump happens to be the president, doesn't he?
It doesn't. He's sitting at 50-50. You're sitting at 20-80.
He's at 48-50, actually, and increasingly people. Oh, you want to call the AP and tell them
they're closing? You want to call CBS News?
Sure.
Right. Okay. We're not going to go to the mat over polls. We're not going to.
His numbers are going. His approval ratings are going down.
Where are yours
All right, we got to leave it there.
Now, this week I'll be bringing you plenty of footage of the mass tantrum happening around America and in other countries as well. It's like it's 2017 all over again. Let's check out the crowd here and tell me if you notice something about these supposed pro-democracy protesters.
It's what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
Yes, did you notice the number of boomers there, elderly folk? These are the people who benefited greatly from America being a manufacturing superpower once upon a time, who bought their homes at a reasonable price. They're protesting for the status quo. If you think the majority of Trump voters care about billionaires losing billions and the share markets diving, then you haven't been paying attention. Here are some sobering facts. In the US, 93% of the stock market is held by just 10%. The top 10%, the bottom 50% of Americans hold only around 1% of all stocks and mutual fund shares. Now let's go to Senator Josh Hawley. He's had enough of paid activists and assorted lefty troublemakers. Here he turns the tables on Code Pink activists who are calling him a baby killer, and he reminds them of their funding from China.
You have the blood of Uyghurs on your hands.
You're a baby killer.
Oh no, you're a baby killer.
You're a baby
the Uyghur
killer.
babies, their blood is on your hands.
How many bombs did you
the
just
blood
vote
of the
to?
Chinese is
You
on
just
your
voted to
hands.
send
And of course of the Jews.
35,000.
Yep, it's high time that these anti-Israeli mobs got a taste of their own medicine.
You're just a Jew hater, right? You're along for the ride.
You're a Christian
oh,
Zionist,
no, you
right?
are, oh no.
Yeah.
Don't accuse me of things. You're a Jew hater. You would destroy the nation of Israel.
Sir, you're a public official.
And you
I'm
love
not the one
China,
dropping bombs
that you
on
are
babies.
taking their money, and that you are rapidly
Taking our money and
anti-Israel.
sending it to a
You
foreign
are absolutely
government.
morally despicable. And I look forward to one day the moral comeuppance that you will deserve. You are morally
I'm a healthcare
abysmal.
worker. I save lives.
You are appalling. You're
I'm
a
a healthcare
hatred for the
worker.
Jews.
I
Who
save
cares?
lives. You are a war criminal, baby killer.
Baby killer.
I just love the way he said, so what, when she kept saying, I'm a healthcare worker. Like that gives her immunity from criticism for her abhorrent activism. Now, we've covered at length Disney's latest woke disaster, Snow White, a film that is bombing at the box office and one that is so bad that even Disney seems a little bit ashamed, scaling back the promotion dramatically. But listen here as the star, Rachel Zegler, does a massive backflip. She's gone from bagging the original story to saying it's an example to admire.
That is part of the beauty of Snow White. It has been for 88 years now that she just sees the good in everyone and everything. And I hope that I and so many people who watch this film can embody that as well.
And let's have a good news story. Watch this thief be chased and tackled to the ground. And the humiliation did not end there. Watch Granny put the baddie in a headlock. Now to fresh revelations of what fueled the deadly rampage of the Nashville school shooter, who killed 6, including 3 children aged just 9 at a Christian school in March 2023. So much of her manifesto was deliberately excluded from the official report released last week, but Megyn Kelly got her hands on the FBI report and the full manifesto.
The report from the Nashville police barely touched on the full scope and breadth of what was contained. The killer's struggles with her gender, her obsession with gender identity, alarming racial animus toward herself as a white person, and how those factors contributed to the act that she committed that day. Why do you think they excluded all of this? Why are those two things too hot to touch? What the Nashville police represented was that her trans ideology, her gender confusion, had absolutely nothing to do with the horrific act she took. Why? How do you glean that? This stuff is all over her writings.
Not only was this mass killer, who was born Audrey but calling herself Adrian, obsessed with radical gender ideology, she also had a deep hatred of America and of white people.
The killer writes about how epic it would have been if she had shot up her own high school. Quote, kill all the white kids, kill my own race. F yes, destroy all the white people who are teachers. Let all the black kids go, unless if I don't like you. The killer goes on, quote, being white sucks, but being black is so cool. Black people should rule, white people should fall. Every white person who lived and died, I hate you all.
Joining me now is comedian and host of Primetime with Alex Stein on Blaze TV. Alex Stein, this is deeply disturbing, but it paints a very vivid picture indeed of what motivated this mass killer. And for 2 years, authorities have deliberately suppressed those key details.
Well, Rita, they have to suppress those key details because when you look at this situation, like multiple other situations that are similar, it's not a gun problem, it's a mental health problem. And when you see that there's multiple transgender shooters that are, on mentally, they're all diagnosed as mentally ill and they're all on some sort of antidepressant or antipsychotic drug. So there seems to be a pattern when it comes to this. And they try to, keep that narrative from actually, reaching the mainstream, even though conservatives have been screaming about this constantly. So this only reinforces people like libs of TikTok and people like myself and people that have actually spoke out about the, pattern recognition when it comes to these shootings.
Now, Alex, I mentioned in Lefties that the stock market correction or crash, whatever you want to call it, is obviously enraging the usual suspects. It's certainly alarming segments of Trump's supporter base as well, including the few billionaires who support him. They've lost a lot of money. But the majority of his supporter base expected, indeed voted for major economic reform. They knew full well there'd be upheaval, there'd be winners and losers. The goal is to make American manufacturing and American workers the winners in the long run. Tell me how this policy is being received, not just by Americans in general, but particularly by Trump's base.
Well, you see people like Elon Musk who's speaking out against it. But of course, Elon Musk owns a multinational corporation, multiple multinational corporations. So it makes sense why he wants open trade. So, he has a vested interest in it. But when it comes to the fairness of the trade between America and all these other foreign countries, it's been unfair for a long time. And you said it best. I mean, when in reality, less than 1% of the population owns 99% of the wealth. When stuff like this happens, of course, people get affected. People have put in money in their portfolio and they see that go down. But I have no doubt in my mind that the stock market will recover, because it usually always does, and will bounce back. So it's just kind of a tough time in the short term, but in the long term, when all of these manufacturing jobs like Hyundai potentially building a $20 billion factory in the United States, it's going to create American jobs and it's going to make our economy stronger in the long run.
Well, the bottom 50% in America only hold 1% of shares. They're far less concerned by stock market fluctuations, no matter how dramatic they may be. And I found this discussion illuminating. This is the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, speaking to Tucker Carlson about the two Americas, not left and right necessarily, but those who are financially comfortable and those who are struggling like never before.
I was really struck by two different statistics last year. Summer of 2024, Americans took more European vacations than they had in history. Summer of 2024, more Americans were using food banks than they ever have in history. I went into two food banks near my hometown to ask, what's the story? And they said, for a lot of people, it's a loss of dignity to walk in a food bank. Of course, it wasn't their traditional clientele. It wasn't people who'd lost their homes. It wasn't people out on the street. These were working families.
Alex, working people having to go into food banks just to put food on the table. They just cannot afford to feed their families. That is just not something that is sustainable for a first world nation, to have people who are working full time who still can't afford the basics.
Yeah, here in America, I mean, it is, they say, the land of milk and honey, but for a lot of people, they're struggling, especially with our college system. These kids get out of college and they're in so much debt, they have to do some sort of gig economy type job like, Uber or Uber Eats, just to kind of make ends meet in between working a 9-to-5 entry level job. So it sounds crazy that you have to work two jobs in America to make it, but you really do. And, you're competing with illegal immigrants for some jobs. You're competing with artificial intelligence. So, it's tough. And even if you do make a living, I'm going to be honest, I make a decent living, but still, my dad's older, trying to save money for him. And it's just, even me making a decent amount of money, things are so expensive now. So I'm not surprised that more people are going to food banks. And really, I'm happy at least there are food banks in our country, that at least we can help some people out. We probably need to do more to help out the struggling Americans. And I think our country's headed in that direction.
Well, this is why so many people in the States and elsewhere really do not care too much about stock market fluctuations. They're not That's not what's keeping them up at night. What's keeping them up at night is how they're going to feed their families. Now, President Trump hosted the LA Dodgers today at the White House. He had the team cracking up after he refused to name a couple of senators that he doesn't like.
And others, we have a couple of senators here I just don't particularly like them, so I won't introduce. Over the course of this amazing season, the members of this team I didn't think it was that big a deal, actually. Washington.
Never seen him so relaxed. He doesn't seem too bothered by the tariff meltdowns.
No, and isn't that just so funny to watch Donald Trump just be himself? You know, that was totally off the cuff. He just said, listen, I don't even want to recognize these senators. I don't like them. They don't like me. So I'm not going to give them my attention. And that's just him being himself. And that's what we didn't have with Joe Biden. Joe Biden was constantly, if he was off script, he was basically just drooling on himself, sadly. So, you know, I love to see a president pretty relaxed like that. And that was an own. And he wasn't even trying to own the senators that were there. So that was hilarious.
Yeah, he was surprised that it was such a big deal that he wasn't going to do that. He had the Los Angeles Dodgers pitcher, Clayton Kershaw, presenting him with his own 47 jersey. Let's have a look.
Mr. President, we have a gift for you as well.
Oh, I like that.
Now, he's quite a superstar, Clayton, and you've got a history with him, Alex. Do tell me what it is.
Well, Rita, Clayton Kershaw and I, we went to high school together at Highland Park High School in Dallas, Texas, where Clayton and I, in middle school, we were on the same Little League baseball team, and he is a future Hall of Famer. You see, that's me. I'm the really obese athlete right there, you can tell. And then also Matthew Stafford, who was a quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams, who recently won a Super Bowl. So I used to think I was bad at baseball, but maybe it's because I was playing against two, future Hall of Famers in different sports. So, yes, I'd love to see Clayton give that jersey to Donald Trump. And Clayton, he's a pretty politically moderate, but I know that all the liberals in California and Los Angeles especially are crying seeing him hand that jersey to Donald Trump. That was awesome to watch.
I can't believe you had two absolute superstars in that one little team. I mean, that is incredible. The little school in Texas, and you've got, 3 stars now from that little team. Now, before you go, Alex, Michelle Obama's podcast has been a big fail, despite considerable hype and promotion. And I'm sure a very lucrative contract she's got there. She just isn't getting the numbers on YouTube or elsewhere. I can't imagine why.
I think a lot of young people, a lot of people in general, because of their narrow view of what's possible, they find themselves limiting what life could look like. And I always challenge young people now to first think about your why. Don't think about the what. Don't worry about numbers and titles.
Alex, she's supposed to be wildly popular, but this little chat we're having right now is going to have more views on YouTube by the morning than her podcast.
Rita, you're exactly right, and you're not being egotistical at all. This Lefties Losing It clip will have millions, and I believe her last podcast had 38,000 views, and she has a marketing team that is, the same ones I think that work with the royal family. So the fact that they can't even get people to care about her podcast, and that's with her brother, it's just, it shows you that she's not as likable as the Democrats think. And what I really think, though, would make the podcast a hit is if she talked about her relationship with Barack, and she said that they were having problems. Could you imagine if it was almost like a divorce therapy podcast? Then you would watch that. Then I would watch. I think that's what she has to do. She has to have the public Hollywood divorce. And that sounds insane, but that's the only way to save that podcast, I feel like.
Yeah, she's got to take one for the team and have a big revelation. Alex Stein, thanks for your time tonight. Well, here's a case of chutzpah. China is accusing the US of bullying after America slapped tariffs on Beijing. And Donald Trump has made it clear that he will impose additional tariffs on China if they impose retaliatory tariffs.
They put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said, if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on.
This comes as countries scramble to make deals with the White House, offering to remove tariffs on US products in return for relief from US tariffs. Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, China, which uses economic coercion to bully smaller countries, is seriously claiming to be bullied here. It's rich, and they impose these tariffs on countries around the world. So for them to be upset about this, it's one thing for Australia to be upset, but China has not really embraced free trade as we know it.
There's a lot of stagecraft going on in this issue that's rocked the world, obviously, and between the US and China, which is a special part of this whole trade war that's happening, it really is the battle of the century between the two superpowers. And if we are moving towards a multipolar world, which is what Team Trump actually does believe, in which it's no longer going to be a single superpower, but China is going to be a fellow superpower, it has to be recalibrated. And tariffs is where this battle is coming to a head. So they're jockeying against it with each other. And what they're after is obviously trade balance, where they're both doing 10 to 12% of trade with each other. But if you add indirect trade that's US bound, China relies on the US more, so that's the leverage that Trump is imposing. The leverage that China has is that a lot of the supply chains that sit there for vital goods, from fertilizer to penicillin, and they know that, semiconductors, et cetera, hard to bring that back overnight. And so this is where you're kind of seeing the rubber hit the road. It could spill out into arenas beyond even tariffs and trade, such as restricting immigration or student visas. We're not anywhere near there yet, but I would not be surprised if all of that gets put on the table.
The supply chain issue is enormous, isn't it? Because successive leaders have really neglected that area. I think during COVID, we realised how dependent we were on China and how dangerous that was. And it's something that has to be addressed. Whoever's in the White House, you cannot have vital goods dependent on China. You've got to be self-sufficient enough that your penicillin doesn't have to come via China, or a portion of it come from China.
And that is something, you're so right, that COVID really put that in the spotlight, and the US has a lot of economic might to wield in that regard, but it is a lesson for everybody, including Australia.
Absolutely. Now, EU nations are ready to negotiate with the US. Let's hear from the European Commission President.
We stand ready to negotiate with the United States. Indeed, we have offered 0 for 0 tariffs for industrial goods, as we have successfully done with many other trading partners, because Europe is always ready for a good deal, so we keep it on the table. But we are also prepared to respond through countermeasures and defend our interests.
It's interesting. They have offered 0 for 0 tariffs for industrial goods. Is that going to be enough for Donald Trump, or is that too narrow?
It feels like it's a start, and it happened awfully quickly. I think Madam Ursula over there, talks about it as though, this is something we do all the time. It's no big deal. She didn't do it last week or last month or last year when she could have.
Absolutely.
Look, it's a start. I think what Trump is after is twofold. One is reciprocity. So the 0 for 0 is one shape that could take. The other is actually trade balance, where the number of things that are present in the market here that come from Europe is somewhat reciprocal in terms of the trade that we do there. So he talks about how US streets are flooded with European and Japanese cars. The reverse is not true, for instance. So that will take longer, where the tariffs even the playing field enough that step 2 is that hopefully the Europeans are actually importing more American goods, which helps go towards reindustrializing America, which is ultimately his goal.
Now, a massive win for the Trump administration in the Supreme Court, lifting a lower court order that blocked the deportation of Venezuelan gangbangers, amongst others. Kosha, it was a 5-4 decision. Amy Coney Barrett, who Donald Trump appointed in his first term, sided with the 3 leftists in the court. Tell me about this victory, what it means for the deportation plan, and the commentary around Coney Barrett. A lot of people are saying she's Donald Trump's biggest mistake.
A lot of people from the Trump base are not happy with her for this decision and other decision. Her and Chief Justice John Roberts, can't rely on them as always being conservative. But notwithstanding that, this is a win, 5-4 for Trump. This is that case 3 Saturdays ago when Justice Boasberg, the federal DC District Court judge, said and ordered the planes that were mid-flight outside of U.S. airspace on their way to taking those to El Salvador, taking those gang members out, have to be turned around and brought back. They defied it. This has been running its way up the court. Trump team asked for an emergency hearing with the SCOTUS, and they said that he does have, as commander-in-chief, jurisdiction in invoking that act and saying and declaring who is a predatory invasion or incursion. So we're not at war with Venezuela. That's where people were arguing. But it is an invasion as defined by him, and he has full jurisdiction to do that, not this judge from D.C. They did say that there's some due process rights that should be or could be allowed to these folks, but it would have to be in the venue where they were held, which would be Texas and not D.C. So it's definitely a slap back on Judge Boasberg. And it is a win for Trump because they're going to be able to continue declaring these most criminal, violent gang members and the like, and getting them out of the country quickly.
And the venue is particularly important. Very big difference between DC and Texas there. And this development in the Supreme Court comes as more than 100 illegal immigrants were nabbed as part of a 5-day mass deportation operation in New York. Now, what's interesting about this, Kosha, among those detained were 3 convicted killers. The New York Post reports the group of murderers includes a 49-year-old from Trinidad and Tobago, a 32-year-old from El Salvador, and a 70-year-old from the Dominican Republic. When Trump talks about criminals, hardened criminals being amongst these illegal immigrants, this is what he's talking about, because the border was so completely compromised that you literally had killers crossing over and living freely in the community.
And the horrible cases that will live on in infamy, like Lake and Riley and others who were killed by people exactly like this and this profile. This is the thing, right? So there's the legal thing with the SCOTUS ruling and the minutia of which jurisdiction and what the Article 2 powers are versus Article 3. That's all important, but the everyday person isn't in the weeds following that. The everyday person does understand criminals with tattoos all the way up to their faces coming in, these young, able-bodied men who have no business being here, were openly welcomed in and then committing crimes. So that politically, it really is a win-win for Trump. No matter what he does, he wins. The people are behind him, and the Democrats are really in a box, I think, politically, when they keep defending people like this.
If the Democrats were smart, they would just ignore this issue. They would just try not to bring any publicity to it and let him do what he wants to do in this arena, because, as you said, anytime there's any sort of media attention, there's any courtroom challenges, it's good for Trump. This is a policy that he wins on with the majority every single time. Now, this has got to be the funniest story of the year for me so far. The New York Post reports Kamala Harris was absolutely blindsided by her landslide loss to Donald Trump. She had bought the hype herself. She thought her campaign was in good shape. They had more money, they had good press. And of course, those dodgy poll numbers that no one with a brain trusted, but she actually thought she was going to win comfortably. This is all in a new book on the 2024 presidential election by The Hill correspondent Amy Parnes. She also says Tim Walz, Kamala's VP candidate, was so stunned by Kamala's terrible performance that he was unable to speak on election night. The author describes the Minnesota governor sitting in his hotel room silently on election night as staffers tried to explain the crushing loss. I can just picture that. That is kind of hilarious in many ways. How could they not see this? Surely they have learnt over the years that the polls always underestimate Trump, that no matter how much good press you get, the media's influence has diminished. And Kamala was a poor candidate, just like Hillary was.
It is so hard to believe. I'm sure Amy Parnes's reporting is well-sourced, and this did happen. And it is, in that way, it is possible to believe, because with Kamala, it goes to the point that she didn't have a lot of depth, just to be very blunt about it. And a lot of people said that about her. So she sounds like somebody who at the high level, okay, I've got more money than Team Trump, which she did. I've got more press and favorable press, which she did. So everything's good. I've got some polls that are saying I'm going well. And she never was able to go deeper and dig deeper and check the validity of that, or how much does money matter? How much does mainstream media press matter, to your point? So maybe she was just floating on that surface level and got a shock. We heard similar reports of Hillary Clinton, apparently, was very, very shocked, 2016, November. That one you could still believe because she was a worthy contender. This one, to anybody who's not in the little bubble, it just feels so impossible to imagine.